When I first talked about Rebel Moon, I said it's a good thing that Zack Snyder isn't just making a Star Wars movie, because if he's not confined to an existing universe, he's free to try something different and maybe show us something we haven't seen before. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. Not only does this come across as a Zack Snyder reskin of Star Wars, but it's just an incomplete movie filled with a barrage of Zack Snyderisms. Rebel Moon is what happens when Zack Snyder doesn't have any constraints, and I know this might seem a little bit contradictory because I was praising the idea of him not being confined to an existing universe, but let me explain, because I think he is a talented director and he has a knack for good visuals, but he needs the help of additional creatives to channel that into something of quality, and we didn't get that with Rebel Moon because he was more or less the creative drive behind it. It's no wonder that the best things he's made were Dawn of the Dead, 300, and Watchmen, all stories that lend themselves to a visual director and written by people with talent. The problem with Rebel Moon is it strikes me as a movie that was kind of written in reverse order, and what I mean by that is usually when there's a movie, you have the script and the story first, and within the script there's certain action scenes so the director can get a hold of the script and kind of add their own flair to those action scenes that were already written into the script. Instead, with this movie, it seems like Zack Snyder just came up with a bunch of ideas for visual set pieces that he wanted to do, and then they brought in a bunch of writers to figure out how they can connect them all together, and the final result kind of comes across as just a series of scenes that aren't really connected to each other, and one happens after the other, and then the movie just kind of ends. And instead, I was hoping this would be basically his version of Star Wars, which is what it was kind of setting out to be, especially since Disney has kind of ruined what they've done with Star Wars, so I was hoping there'd be something to replace it, and unfortunately this isn't it. The basic plot of the movie has our main character Cora working as a farmer in a small village when a ship arrives that belongs to an authoritarian empire. I don't necessarily object to the Nazi imagery associated with the bad guys, especially since George Lucas did the same thing for Star Wars, but I did feel it was a little too on the nose with this one. The villagers are initially unsure how to approach the situation. They're talking about whether they should comply, whether they should resist. Then, after the leader of the invading army kills the village leader, the citizens again discuss whether they should resist or comply. You would think the decision has been made for them at this point, but no, they're really recycling the exact same conversation that they just had a few minutes earlier. And in fact, this is something that happens quite a bit throughout the movie, where they basically redo the exact same conversation and add nothing to it. It's almost like the writers don't expect their audience to be able to keep up with the boring talky bits, so they keep having the exact same conversations and relaying the exact same information that the audience knows, and even the characters for that matter already know. The Empire then demands the village give them the bulk of their future harvest, and they'll be back to collect when it's done. Cora wants to leave because she knows there's no stopping the Empire, but has a change of heart when she hears some of the soldiers that were left back to monitor the village start attacking a girl. Good thing the evil soldiers never learned that guns actually shoot, otherwise they might have just shot her instead of moved into a close range where she could easily grab a hold of their weapons and disarm them. Cora ends up killing all the soldiers in a very slow motion scene with the help of another soldier who's defecting because they're so evil, and as a result the rest of the village decides that maybe they should resist him, so Cora and her friend from the village, Gunnar, set out to try to recruit more people to help them. And what about that good soldier who helped them out? Don't know. He's not in it for the rest of the movie. It does feel kind of like the movie forgot about him, but since this is a two-part, maybe he's going to have something to do in the second movie, but it just seems kind of weird to establish his character in this movie and then just really do nothing with him outside of this little bit at the start. And then for the rest of the movie, it's just Cora and Gunnar going around recruiting more people, and that's pretty much it. This whole movie strikes me as a first act that was stretched out into over 2 hours with repeating dialogue and set pieces that might look visually interesting, but really add nothing of substance and probably could be cut out entirely. This is basically a rundown of how the whole movie plays out from this point forward. Cora and Gunnar go to a new planet to recruit someone. There's a situation with this person, the situation immediately gets resolved, and then they leave that planet with that person and then go to the next place, rinse and repeat, and that's pretty much it for the whole movie. For instance, the first place they go to is this bar for information, and it reminds me of the cantina from Mos Eisley's in Star Wars. I'm going to be generous and say Zack Snyder was just trying to pay homage to it and not necessarily rip it off, but either way, much like in Star Wars, they get accosted by some guy, but instead of Obi-Wan cutting off the person's arm and he runs off, Cora just kind of hits him and he runs off, and that's pretty much it. They get the information that they need to, and they tell each other like, okay, we're going to need a pilot if we're going to get to this next place. And then sure enough, the bad guy comes back with reinforcements this time. And at this point, I'm telling myself, it'll be very cliched if they get into a fight with this guy and then there's someone in that bar who happens to jump in to save them. That guy agrees to join them and he happens to be a pilot. And sure enough, towards the end of the fight that has way too much slow-mo, Jax Taylor jumps up and shoots one of the bad guys, and sure enough, he's also a pilot and he has a ship and he agrees to take him to where they need to go. And this is just kind of how things go throughout the rest of the movie. Certain conveniences and information that's conveyed in a more complex manner than what it needs to be conveyed in. Like, take for example, the giant spider from the trailer. Now, I personally liked the design of it. I thought it was kind of unique, but it's really only there for one scene and probably could have been omitted entirely, because what happens in this scene is they go to this planet to recruit this swordswoman, and then she fights the giant spider, wins, and then joins them, and then that's pretty much it. Her skills with swords could have been conveyed in a more streamlined fashion, but no, this scene was in the movie just simply because Zack Snyder wanted to have a giant spider fight in his movie.
But then all of a sudden, like a giant fucking spider shows up.
I think in Zack Snyder's mind, this is what world building is, where you just have all these different creatures, you have all these different looks from the planets and things like that. Just throw all this stuff out there and it's establishing a world, right? Well, not quite. Now, I do appreciate the different creature designs. Like I said, with the spider, I like that. I think some of the other ones look pretty good. The planets, I like how they have their own unique look to them. It's not like the Disney Star Wars thing where they're all just a variation of the exact same desert. But still, it really does strike me as kind of hollow. And I think the difference is basically the same differences that you would see in a well-made costume. You can have a really good costume made by the best costume makers in the industry, and then you can have a well-made costume, but it looks worn. You know, you have like the dirt on it. It's faded. It has like little tears and holes and stuff like that. It looks like it was clothes that someone wore versus a costume off the rack. And I think the devil is in the details. And with Rebel Moon, the world building, I think, kind of falls a little bit short of that because it really has a lot of stuff, but it doesn't quite have enough details to really sell it. That's really how I can sum up this movie. Something that may look cool at a glance with maybe the start of an interesting story, but it lacks the necessary details to truly bring it to life, and Zack Snyder's tendency of style over substance holds it back from something I would recommend to anyone outside of his existing fan base. If someone is a diehard Zack Snyder fan, this gives you all the flashy visuals and slow motions you could ask for, but for me, I'd probably give this a 3 out of 10. Let me know what you think about this movie in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Or did you not even bother watching this movie? I really want to know what people have to say. And if you like this video, make sure you click that like button. Also, could you share the video out there and subscribe to my channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest in pop culture news? Thank you.